Bonjour, that's French. Namaskar, that's Bengali. Good day, that's English. And Dobry den, that's Czech. That's our family. Yes, there are two reasons why I'm here. I'm here because I'm his son, and I'm coming here to duly, of course, pay honor and support him, and touch his feet in due respect. Secondly, my poor father, God bless him, at 95 years, still peppy, has hearing difficulties. So we've agreed upon my being a transmitter, providing you with the background, and you're providing us with the key questions, and then we'll move it. Now, believe it or not, the way in which it works is, you pose the question in any of the languages that I recited. It could be in French, it could be in Bengali, it could be in Hindi, and it could be in Czech. But my father and I, we speak Czech. Very strange family. That's what happens when you join Netaji. We are mysterious. We are the unknowns. People don't know who we are. To this day, they don't even know where Netaji is. In the history of India's struggle for freedom, one man stands out in distinctiveness and a class by itself. In physique, mental constitution, manner and lifestyle, ideology and action, packed with drama, the daring Subhash Bose. Indeed, a vague phenomenon in India's struggle for independence. Now, I'll give you some background so that father can be situated. I wish he could give you the full talk, but you're going to have to listen to me for a while. Just for a while. The key man is here, not me. I'm just a transmitter. It was probably in Germany that Subhash Chandra Bose, a heroic freedom fighter of India, was first known as Netaji, which literally means leader of leaders. He was prominently active in the India Congress movement that struggled for independence, where he became the leader. He then went on to activate for India's freedom from overseas. This is where my father comes in. For example, the period of his stay away from India and Germany was from April 41 to February 43. These Netaji Berlin years are still in many ways a riddle. Questions are still asked. What motivated Netaji to be associated with Hitler's Germany? Beyond any shadow of a doubt, he was solely and unequivocally guided by one desire, the full liberation of Mother India from the brutal clutches of the British Empire. The prime idea which inspired Netaji was to explore all possible means for achieving that cherished goal of India's overdue independence. His stay in Germany was in line with the concept that the enemy's enemy is your friend. Plain and simple. He lined up with Nazi Germany solely from that perspective, and there is no controversy to this. It is in this context that my honored father, who was training with Batas, as was mentioned, in the current Czech Republic, was nationalistically motivated. He was directly invited by Netaji to join the government in exile in Berlin and to be a part of the Indian National Army in evolution. This Free India Center at the heart had approximately 35 members, where father was one of the members. Hitler gave this institution diplomatic status. He also assisted Netaji with the INA. Now, before father interacts with you through a question-answer period where he is more at ease, let me now read you a key article about him that appeared in the Kolkata Telegraph in January of 1995. This article well summarizes his role in Netaji's ranks. Rather than him boast, let's hear what the reporter says. I must immediately point out that in all his humility, he never made mention to me in my youth of this voluntary and devoted period in his life where he served under Netaji in Germany. I did not know that. At the time of service, I had just been born from our home base in current Czech Republic, where my father worked and where he married my Slovak mother. Towards India's final independence, we settled in India in 46. The article that I will read you was sent to me upon mother's death in India. God bless her. And she's buried in the right place. She is not dead. The article revealed much to me about the father and Netaji in a late period in my life here in Canada, where I had long immigrated. Father was like a museum piece in India that I had to dust to come out to his real image. I didn't know who he was. He never told me of his service under Netaji. I had to read it like you're about to hear. This article was sent to me by Swati Bhattacharjee in the India Telegraph. It was December 1928, the year in which the Congress conference was held in Kolkata, and the presidency presidents Motilal Nehru came to attend the conference. A young boy from Uttarpara had come to watch this great event. That was when he first saw Subhash Chandra Bose, the GOC general officer commanding of the meeting. Bose was riding on a horse. His appearance, personality, and the way he commanded the horse all made a deep impression on the young boy. 5 years later, he was to meet Bose again, not in India though, but at the Asiatic Students' Conference in Rome in 1933. Netaji, on his way to Vienna for treatment, had stopped over for a few days to attend the conference. He had listened to the problems of Asian students and professionals who had come from all over Europe to attend the conference and had offered his advice. And among so many young Indians at the meet, Bose had picked out the boy from Uttar Bharat. Perhaps because he was 20 years old, he was probably the youngest at the time. Bose embraced him and said, "Rameswar, don't let the West spoil you. You must return to India one day." Today, my 95-year-old father reminisces about his days with Netaji. He's a widower, with me, the son, now settled in Canada. Mukerjee lives alone in his spacious apartment. Yet, if there is one word to describe Rameswar Mukerjee's experience during the Second World War, it is, quote-unquote, interesting. As employee of Bata, Mr. Mukerjee was sent to Zlin, Czechoslovakia for training in 1933. After his introduction to Netaji in the same year, he saw Netaji once again in 1936 at Vienna at another Asiatic Students' Conference. This time, however, there was no opportunity to meet Netaji in person. Yet, it was clear that Subhash Bose remembered Rameswar well. For when he began selecting Indians for his Azad Hind government in Berlin in 1941, he thought of Rameswar. He sent a car with a German police escort to bring Rameswar to Berlin from Zlin. Bata could not say no even, that's what I understand. The car was made very clear as to who he was. The Bata president complied with Netaji's request and released Mr. Mukerjee on a loan service. Arriving at the center of the Azad Hind government at Berlin, Mukerjee found Netaji and his associates in deep discussion. It was Jallianwala Bagh Day, and the solemn occasion was being observed with due dignity. But Netaji took time off from the meeting to welcome Rameswar. The volunteers of the Azad Hind government in Europe mainly comprised of intellectuals, many of them students studying in Germany, Austria, and France. The brilliant young men responded spontaneously to Netaji's call to help India's freedom struggle right from Europe. For 2 years and more, Mukerjee was an integral part of this mini India in an alien and hostile land. It's important to stress this now. Though the attitude of the Germans onwards Indians was friendly enough, the Hitler government was plainly racist. That was clearly understood by those, including my father, he will never forget. So that was clear, there was no ifs and buts. However, every bit of help was extended to Netaji and his associates. Mukerjee and his colleagues would sometimes meet Netaji in conferences when Netaji then sportingly, with a military uniform, would address them. Sometimes they would have even meals together. Most of the time, however, Netaji would be too busy meeting people and making plans which were closely guarded secrets. Only Nambiar, Netaji deputy, knew that Netaji was going to leave for Tokyo in a German submarine. The rest of them in Berlin, like Mukerjee, learned about it on radio after Netaji had reached Japan, apparently. Soon after Netaji's departure, the Azad Hind government at Berlin began to collapse. Mukerjee himself sought permission to leave Berlin in 1943. Quote, "The continuous bombing was getting hard for me even to bear," he confesses. "Those were not like Japanese bombs," he says. "They were extremely powerful ones. Even when they fell some distance away, the impact lifted people bodily from one end of the room to another." Besides, he was worried about wife and family, his child that he had met and was returning back to Czech Republic. In 1943, Mukerjee returned to Zlin and joined Bata again. The Nazis fell in 1945, and suddenly one day a group of Allied army officials came to his house. They searched it, seized everything, papers, diaries, photographs, anything that had to do with the Azad Hind and his connections. And with that chapter closed. Today, Mr. Rameswar Mukerjee lives in Czech. So I read you that article because that gives you an overview of what your father went through, and rather than him chat about it in that sense, and rather than me even say it, we read it straight from the press. It's to me a heritage. I even put it up on a wall in my house because I think it's quite something as a piece of history for me, having been part of this in a small way. Now I'm opening my big mouth, so let me finish off. I wish to say as an update, over the past 5 years, I sponsored my elderly father to join me in Canada in his late 80s, and now he's in his 90s. I'm proud that India-Canada Association of Ottawa immediately honored him on National Independence Day with a special volunteer service award for his commitment under Netaji. I take this occasion to particularly thank Mrs. Sunita Patel, a leader of the Indo-Canadian community who's here with us. She was the one who egged us on and said, "We've got to honor your father. We've got to honor your father." Well, that was very kind, and I can tell you it's very touching to him because you're not a prophet in your own land. he was never recognized back home. He's recognized in Canada. Never by his own people back home. A leader in the Indo-Kenyan community for bringing this award stage all the way here in Canada. Interestingly, my father has not been formally recognized even by my own Bengali community. That's another interesting comment. You know, we guys don't know what's happening. You know, the Bengali community is too busy. We're making too many meals and movies and I don't know what else. Okay? We have no time for these things. For the record, upon father's imprisonment, you can see it's in Netaji influence. We have shit disturbance. For the record, upon father's imprisonment by the British, everything was seized. His word and his national spirit is Netaji proof enough. Yes, you are never a prophet in your own land, and you remain a mystery. Finally, and I will end with this, I've said enough, on India's soil, on the very grounds of the High Commission, my father went to the recent Republic Day celebration. At 95 years old, he boldly stood in the cold to sing the national anthem and to witness the raising of the flag. As soon as the flag rose, he was the only one, I repeat, the only one, who firmly stood to attention and gave full salute to the flag. Free India. In him, Netaji is still alive. And to that, I got a beautiful letter from the High Commissioner to my father. Since I also, all my other colleagues at the India High Commission were delighted that your father could join us on Republic Day celebrations at the Chancery. It's very important for all of us to have someone like him to join us on such occasions. Of course, I did notice that your father saluted the flag during national anthem. It was entirely appropriate that he did so, for he is a soldier. It is only soldiers who salute the flag on such occasions. It was wonderful to watch him. So there you are. He is alive. Netaji is alive, and I think it's far more important now you get a chance to question him. He is the spokesperson. I'm not. I only gave you the introduction. I've given you the context. Let him hear you. You send a signal here. If I have to, I'll put it in Czech. It'll come out in English. Ajit, please.
I have a question about the statement you made that enemy is a friend. I agree that we were in high school then, and the war was going on, and Britain was losing, and Germany was winning. We were all pro-German. 29 students out of 30 voted that they would like Germany to win, and they thought that Germany would win. But after Netaji did go to Germany, he should have found out that enemy's enemy wasn't a friend, but he was a worse, than the enemy. Enemy was a bit more sort of friendly nation than the German. And when you go to Japan, they used to tie Indian soldiers to trees, prisoners, and they used the young soldiers to stab them when they were still alive. So that's the kind of nation that was during the war. So what I'm wondering is, since I have come out of India, now I have sort of learned some of the things. I feel that I don't think it was the right thing to do, to go to look for Germans' assistance, because if Germany had won, India would probably still be a slave country, and I don't know how many million would be sort of destroyed because our noses weren't right, or our color wasn't right, or our futures didn't fit the mold. So, would you comment on that?
Yeah.
I don't think it was alliance. We got praised right to work. That was the reason, nothing else. Nothing with Hitler, nothing with the Germans. We were independent, we had our national corporation, and we were working separately, not with the Nazis. Of course, Nazi Germany it was.
Go ahead once more.
Yeah, one more small one. But when the Indian National Army was fighting against the Indian forces and the British forces, everything was supplied by the Japanese. But if Japanese had conquered, do you think that they would allow Indian army forces, which was a very small number, to get independence? I don't think they would have given India independence.
I don't think so, because we wanted also to organize independence fight. So Netaji was the only person who arranged in foreign land.
Yeah. I guess what Father means is that he was a gel, he was a cataclysm, and a point of reference that they had at that time. Convenience maybe is what one might say, but the implications were not fully digested necessarily.
No.
Yeah. And Father always used to tell me, if I may have that sound, that they always felt independent of them. He said Hitler couldn't care a shit, and vice versa. He just gave them, put it bluntly, he gave them diplomatic status. You want to operate? Go ahead. You've got those guys as your enemy, fine. But they didn't give any support, didn't give any real backup of any substance. So it was a touch and go. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, could you, Mr. Mukherjee, throw some light on circumstances of Netaji's death? It is always a mystery as far as I'm concerned. So maybe you can throw some light on that.
Netaji was not a person who will hide himself.
Right.
So Netaji is not alive.
Yeah.
He died in Japan.
Well, that's Father's view. Okay. You can have any other comments on that?
Can I throw some light on this?
Go ahead.
I read a book by John Tolan. He is an American historian who lived in Japan for about 25-30 years after the Second World War. And he had access to all their archives. And in this book, if you'd like to read it, it's called The Rising Sun by John Tolan. He mentions how Netaji was killed. Japan had already occupied Burma, and they were about to go towards India. As a matter of fact, they reached to Calcutta. And at that time, Netaji was sending messages saying that it's the Indians, if the Indians should be part of the army to be seen as liberators and not as occupiers. If Japan came in, it would be an occupying power.
Right.
And in that circumstance, I think he already created a rift between himself and the Japanese High Command. And later on, they said that he was killed in a plane crash, which is very mysterious. That's the story John Tolan writes.
Another theory. Yeah. Okay. Please feel free. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Did you have any occasion to know Netaji as a person, to get some personal glimpses? What kind of a person he was, what habits he had, what was his nature? Because political circumstances you can read in the book, but this is something I have not read anywhere or.
His personality was as a soldier should have. He was a soldier. And he was friendly also. But he was really a strict soldier. That I knew.
Go ahead, yes.
For example, did he have any code of discipline, for his army, or what they should do on a day-to-day basis?
He was a disciplined soldier, I am repeating. He was a disciplined soldier. Soldiers are always disciplined. Those are not, they are out. He was a disciplined soldier, not as a leader.
Yes.
The INA seems to have been given short shrift in the written history, and to the point that the new generations don't know much, if anything at all, about the INA. So I have two questions. One, do you think, sir, that whether the INA had anything to contribute to the Indian independence? And if it did, why do you think the INA has been neglected in the writing of history?
They are not writing because this is our government. Government didn't like Netaji's action. He was independent. The India government has nothing mentioned. Since I think in 1941, I was repeatedly writing to Delhi. Okay.
No response.
No response.
Well, he claims there was censorship, I guess, blockage, I don't know. Yes, sir. I'll get back to you. Yes, sir.
What was Netaji's reaction to Mahatma Gandhi's non-violence movement? Because their paths were entirely different.
Good question.
Netaji did not like Mahatma Gandhi's slow motion policy. So he left.
Uncensored. Yes, sir.
My follow-up question was that we've had several different governments in India now. So what is it that changing governments, different parties when they come to power, all of them find it expedient to neglect that part of our history? It's not that there's one party or one ideology that found it difficult to digest, or there were some alliances, some allegiances that necessitated it. It's just that every government, no matter what stripe, what color, seems to have found it necessary to go through this ongoing neglect.
Before Father answers, if I may just point out, it's very interesting that Kolkata had an airport called Dum Dum. Didn't make any sense, but that's what it was called. Now it is called Netaji Subhash Bose Airport, which is very interesting. It took very long to get that recognition, even in Bengal. So I can see where you're coming from. It's, it seems to trail that this man's controversial or mysterious role vis-a-vis INA and everything else. And I'll ask Father.
India government did not recognize why they were right. Nobody is writing about INA. INA was independent and died independent.
Yes, sir.
I think I first should apologize for I'm a Bengali, and I was founder member of Deshantari, the Bengali Association of Ottawa. And I think I'm going to talk to some of the executives on that it never sort of paid our respects to your father do that. But the question I always had, and something I guess, I don't know if you can answer, sir, is if India became independent under Netaji, would he sort of pursued fascist ideas, or he would have made that a democratic country? Do you have anything on that?
Go, Acha.
Netaji's government was in Germany, fascist country, that's true. But he was never, and he will never become a fascist. Netaji was a truly Democrat. He was not a fascist. He had place in Germany, and we were working there independently. That was his policy, nothing else.
Yes, sir.
Do you know anything about Rameswar Bose? I have heard that he was first the founder member of the INA, and then subsequently Subhash Bose, when he came from Germany, Tokyo, he took the Tokyo. Did you have any contact with Rameswar Bose?
Rameswar Bose was in Japan. He was the first to organize the independence comes there in Japan. After that, Netaji, I didn't know whether he met, I have no knowledge about this, I can't tell you anything about it.
Have you written a book or articles on this issue? If not, may I request, sir, that you write one, because it's a very important subject.
Well, you see, I must confess I'm a non-matric. To write a history, I must request my son. If he does, definitely I will. It will be a true story.
Okay. Haji. Okay, one.
It's been very interesting so far. One question, since you lived with Netaji for 3-4 years, I believe, in Germany and during the war, now you must have had opportunities to discuss what was happening in Germany and what Hitler was doing, what the whole fascist regime was doing. So could you please shed some light, like discussing this with Netaji, or did Netaji ever discuss those things, and how did he take all that? And what was his view, point of view? Thank you.
We have never discussed, not we wanted to discuss with him. Never.
I'd just like to comment on the question that if Indian National Army had influence on independence. I think it did. What happened was, after Japan was defeated, then the British arrested all the Indian National Army officers. They were being tried in the court, and then Nehru was their lawyer. So we were in colleges by that time, and we were all marching against them. The whole country was up in arms that they should be released.
Interesting, very, very profound, interesting, thank you. You have a question?
My question is that it's been said that the word Jai Hind was uttered by Netaji first. It is he who coined that expression. Is that true?
Yes. Jai Hind was announced by Netaji.
When and where?
Oh, when and where?
It was in last Congress was
Tripura Congress?
I think so. That was his last Congress. He said Jai Hind.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Last time.
Interesting.
Netaji said.
Maybe I will make a comment that the Netaji title was conferred on Subhash Bose by Rabindranath Tagore when he became the mayor of Calcutta Corporation. That was before my time, I guess, in 1936, after Simon Commission's recommendations. India was given partial administrative facilities. And in that part of that scheme was the mayorship, and Subhash Bose became the first Indian mayor, first mayor. And at the ceremony, Rabindranath Tagore addressed him as Netaji. And also, Rabindranath Tagore conferred the title Mahatma on Mahatma Gandhi.
Thank you very much, thank you. Any other comments or questions, please? Feel free. I hope we give you a fair overview and appreciate any reaction, deep critical, controversial, that's part of it. Yes?
Can Mr. Mukherjee give some personal experiences with Netaji? We have not heard him talk about his own experiences with him. A few anecdotes, perhaps.
I met Netaji first in Vienna, Austria. There was a All Asiatic Student Conference. There I met. First, then after that I met. He was in Czechoslovakia also for a day only in Prague. Then in Vienna, Austria, it was in 64 or something. 44 and after that never saw Netaji again. He disappeared.
From what my father used to tell me when I had discussions with him, there was very little interpersonal time with him. He was very formal in the military and everything else, and disciplined, but there was very little intimate moments with him. And it's interesting that when I asked him too the same question, did he crack any jokes? I mean, did he say anything to you? I mean, we'd like to know something. Gossip? What was the gossip then in those days? Nothing. It's like the relationship was very businesslike and yet intimate in terms of loyalty. That was about it, from what I can understand. Him telling me many times I've asked him that question. I might add that, one inspiration for him, and I'm grateful to him too, on a personal level. He married, as you know, and some don't even know whether he married, but he did marry outside. And he married Austrian. And my father did the same, was inspired and married in Slovakia. Now, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Netaji, no way. Because he was living. So you see, I mean, he freed me in a sense. So it's interesting, he broke the chain, and he was a symbolic figure. If he did it, then father said I was inspired by him. You see, so it's amazing how little things, that way he should have mentioned maybe the gossip, but I'm afraid that's all he told me too, so we don't know any much more. He was a mysterious figure.
Another question.
Yeah?
What were some of your father's qualities that attracted him to Netaji?
Oh.
What impressed Netaji about him?
As a leader, I loved him.
Yeah, as a leader.
As a leader, I loved him. He was also a good-looking man. He was a very strong man. When he was talking, delivering speech, I was really thinking that man will be one leader, and he was leader. But unfortunately, he died.
And what did he like about you?
Why did he like you?
Netaji was not Nata like me. Netaji was a really true soldier.
Why did he like you? Why did he like you?
Not as a Bengali. He met me in Italy, All Asiatic Student Conference. There were about 118 Indians and I think 9 or 10 Bengali. But he came to me, my table, what from you are coming? Czechoslovakia. What are you doing? Shoemaking. Oh. After learning a job, go back to India and work for the country. That was it. That's all.
Yes, sir.
You just mentioned that, you mentioned an Austrian lady. Do we know anything about the family, like the Austrian lady and children or whatever?
Yes.
And where are they and the rest of that?
It's a daughter, but I don't know where. Netaji's a daughter. Where is she? In Germany?
She is in Germany and she got married. Now got one daughter. Yes.
Okay.
In Germany. What you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wonder, you mentioned that INA was independent of Germany and so on while in Berlin. Germany. Who was supporting at that time, providing funding and all that?
German government.
Oh, German government.
That is why we were Nazis. We were called Nazis.
In a sense, you can't disassociate yourself. When poor father came back to Czechoslovakia, he was jailed for being a Nazi. Okay? When he got to India, he was jailed for being Netaji. So, he got it hit two ways. Understand?
I'd like to ask you
Yes.
one point. Did you become an INA soldier in Germany or in Japan? Did you ever
Germany.
visit Japan?
Germany.
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 So you never visited Japan?
No.
He was German.
And in Japan, Netaji, I believe, only for a few months as far as I understand.
Yeah, few months.
Back to the other question. His daughter's name is, I guess, Anita.
Anita.
And Subhash Bose had a brother, older brother, Sharat Chandra Bose,
Yes.
who had become a minister in the first Indian Guard. And he had visited her in Germany after the war.
Yes.
So, but she, it seems, wanted the whole thing to be kept
Quiet.
quiet.
Right. Yeah.
Dr. Obia was now looking after this
Netaji Bhavan.
Yes.
Yeah, there is a museum in Calcutta, Netaji Bhavan. Yeah. Yes, sir.
What was the response of the Germans towards the independence of India when they were in Berlin? Because from my remembrance, in Germany, the majority of the Indians living there, they are from Bengal, from Calcutta. So is there any relationship with that?
Good question. I don't know if you can answer. Similar position of German
Actually, Hitler or Germans didn't like the Indians too. But since Netaji was there, they helped us. We were working there like this. That's all. No serious connection was with the Germans.
No support for independence.
Yeah, no, because it is surprising. Even the population of Indians living in Berlin, and 80% are mostly from Bengal.
Right.
This is something, because I spent close to 2 years in Berlin myself.
Right.
And so I'm always looking for an answer for that.
History, yeah.
Nobody gave you over there?
Okay, yeah.
How aware was Mr. Rameswarji and his colleagues about the goings-on in Berlin while they were there? I mean, were they aware of what was going on? Were they appalled by what the Third Reich was doing?
You see, we didn't know anything what the Germans were doing, you know. Hitler was hidden in an underground bunker. We had our headquarters also very close. But he was safe. We were not safe. We were always looking when we will die. Because bombing was 1944 and every day and night. Night was restriction, but night they were Anglo-Americans bombing Germany. And we were there living.
Yes, sir.
I want to ask another question. Did you have any idea of Holocaust at that time when you lived in Berlin?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking.
Totally isolated
Yeah.
from this reality. Well, many Germans didn't even know that. That's the interesting part. Many Germans didn't even know that. What more, locked in. They were out of tune. Anyway, that's a very disturbing reality.
What was the ultimate strategy of Netaji? Did he think with the few soldiers that he had abroad that he would be able to liberate India?
Well, when he was not in India, we couldn't say whether he will achieve that independence with his soldiers. He tried, but unfortunately he died.
Yes, sir.
I have no questions, and I have never met Subhash Bose, but I have certain impressions of that time. And in view of all the discussions that have taken place and the acuteness of the people, I thought that I might share some of those impressions with you. The first impression that I have about Subhash Bose is that he was a very strong individual, something which he thought perhaps. And the basic proof of this is that when he was elected president of the Indian National Congress at Haripura, he was not actually the majority candidate. He was elected against the candidate who was supported by Mahatma Gandhi. And Mahatma Gandhi at that time, whatever he said in the country, that was, so if somebody could be, and it actually speaks volumes about the way Congress was functioning at that time, that although Mahatma Gandhi supported the candidate and he was defeated, even then the Congress had Subhash Bose as the president. Ultimately, of course, he resigned. So that was the first impression that I had. And as far as I remember, because I was in college at that time, so there were those who were the presidents at that time. He was perhaps the most popular and most loved and most revered Congress presidents of that time. Then the second thing which I remember of that time is when he escaped from India. Now that story, I don't know because it's almost 60 years back, so I don't remember exactly, but I think Uttam Chandra was from Afghanistan. Somebody, I don't remember actually, maybe Uttam Chandra actually wrote that story. It was serialized in Hindustan. So from day to day, and all that story was written. And so he was trying to escape, and he escaped ultimately to Germany. And that also shows that whatever he thought, whatever he wanted to do, he had a very strong will to do it. Because he went on his own, and you can imagine, all of us are sitting, nobody can actually think that on his own a man can actually free a country like India. Now, there was a question about the ideology of Subhash Bose and the ideology of Mahatma Gandhi. I don't know whether this Quit India movement in 1942 is being written in history as a sort of a freedom struggle or something like that. But I was quite a grown-up college student at that time, and actually I was one of the participants during that period, not as a politician but as a student. We were affected because all colleges were closed and all those things happened. My impression is that the independence of India has nothing to do with either non-violence of Mahatma Gandhi or violence of the ideology of Subhash Chandra. It is actually partly because due to the Second World War, all those colonial powers had become so weak, they were not actually in a position to hold all these. And the proof is that so many countries actually became independent after the war. So you can say this could have been the catalyst, but now it is true that Bose never liked the non-violence movement. Even today, nobody says whether non-violence is actually a potent tool or not. But at that time, Mahatma Gandhi thought that if you oppose somebody non-violently, so non-violence can actually work only with well-meaning people, because only well-meaning people can think that you are suffering and you should not be allowed to suffer. But if you are non-violent against a terrorist like Bin Laden, I don't know what Then the last thing that I would say is about this Indian National Army. I think because of this association with Germany and fascist Germany, and particularly I would say that when this war broke out, at that time there was more of goodwill for Germany rather than Britain. And some of the Punjab papers in Urdu they used to write when actually the Germans were actually along the coast, they were actually marching ahead, and the British troops were actually retreating. So they used to say, "Fasal dushman ki hoti hai, kadam sarkar ka hatta." That means the British government is retreating. Fasal sarkar ki hoti hai, aur kadam dushman ka aage badhta hai. So the enemy is actually marching ahead, while the British government is actually retreating. So generally, as far as I remember at that time, the goodwill was, and it was partly because of this that there was British rule and people were not very. And there is another misunderstanding about the British rule in India. People generally have a feeling that all this infrastructure, all this development, civilization, and whatever has been there has been actually provided by the British during the rule, and whatever India has got, it is that. Actually, I was an officer under the British government in 1945. So, I don't know whether anybody can imagine that when I actually took my charge as a sub-divisional officer, on my table, we did not have a ball pins. Instead of ball pin, बबूल का कांटा जो है वो रखा जाता था कागजों को बांधने के लिए. India was not manufacturing in Alpine, etc. When these Japanese actually attacked this southeast and they were bordering Burma, at that time the Britishers actually they wanted to have trunk routes for movement of troops. And at that time, this Tata plant was actually established in 1911. But up to 1941-42, they were not actually manufacturing rails, or you can say they were not allowed to do it. So that was the state of development, and therefore the British government had actually to take out branch lines to lay down trunk routes so that the troops could move. And the last thing which I actually digressed in between, so which I wanted to say was about the Indian National Army. Now, if there is a sort of impression that because they fought side by side with the Japanese, and Japanese, everybody knows, and the history records, that they were not very friendly with the prisoners of those countries which they annihilated. But when this trial took place, so there was a lot of tremendous goodwill so far as those people were concerned. Pandit Nehru was not the liar, but actually he headed the liars. It was more of symbol, because Pandit Nehru had never attended any court, although he was a barrister, but he was never an actual liar. And Bhulabhai Desai perhaps was the main person and who actually defended. And as far as I remember as a young man at that time, that there was a tremendous goodwill so far as the Indian National Army was concerned. So all that we can see is that at no stage anybody in the country, most of the people in the country never had a feeling like that Subhash Bose has gone to the enemies or has become a traitor or something like that. He was actually held in great esteem at that time, and I think it has been continued to be like that all the time. That's all.
Thank you for that overview. I don't know what the energy level is now, but I give my father just more credit. He's got more energy than me. Many people say that he looks more my younger brother than. So.
Can I elaborate on one point,
yeah.
if you don't mind? My understanding is that the parting of ways between Netaji and Mahatma Gandhi took place at the time when Mahatma wanted his candidate, his appointee, his nominee to be appointed, not elected. And Subhash Chandra was the only one who said, this is not fair, this is not democratic. Just because you are Mahatma does not authorize you to appoint somebody as the president of Congress. And so he put his own name. He said, there must be election. There must be election. And he did win. Yeah. But soon after, at the acceptance speech, he thanked everybody and then he resigned on the spot. That's my understanding. I may be wrong, but that's my understanding. He resigned, and that's where the party comes from.
Well, that's history, but it's live still. You can see that. I just want to take this occasion to thank the Indian Canada Friendship Circle and all of you particularly to have been so kind to listen to dear father. This is the first time, believe it or not, that he's done this. It took a lot of convincing to have him do this. And it's an honor that he's been given a chance to pour out his esprit. Because that's really what it was all about. It was his esprit. And there was no technique, there were no job requirements or anything like that. It was the esprit. So he shared that with you. I tried to help it because, as you can see, he has had some hearing problems. But between the Czech, English, French, and everything else, we got through.
On behalf of all of us here, on behalf of my colleagues on the ICFC board, my heartfelt thanks to Rameswarji. Thank you so much for taking the time. To his son, Mr. Roman Mukerjee, for entertaining us. Thanks for giving us your perspectives and your glimpses to an interesting and a very fascinating time in India's history. And before I pass it on to Mr. Mukerjee for the vote of thanks, I have two commercial announcements. Anjali and company are going to be performing at the Arts Sport Theatre April 28th and 29th in the Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi and Odissi styles. And there will be a sitar performance by Shujat Khan on Saturday, May the 20th. And this is presented by the Hindustani Sangeet Mangal. So Anilji, for the